Hello and welcome to Angles and Acids, where we learn things maths and science. And today's video is about proportions and how we can represent them with quantities. So what is a proportion? Well, I don't want to go too much into that. It's basically a way of viewing one quantity in relation to something else. So for example, for drawing, we often pay attention to how large some of the human features are relative to other ones. So how big the hand is compared to the size of the forearm. You would pay attention to things like this so that when you are drawing your characters, their features look right. They look like they have human proportions. If you don't, then you can turn them into quite like a cartoon. So for example, Mickey Mouse has gigantic hands, which is not realistic. So we got three ways representing proportions. We can represent them using percentages, we can use them representing them with fractions, and we can also represent them using ratios. So my first example up on screen is a basic percentage of a proportion. So here, by proportion, it apparently seems to be that around 55 to about 75% of the human body, I think it's by weight, is made of water. That means that out of the entire body, 50 to 75% of it is water. My next example I can look at as a fraction. Here I've got four characters that I use in my classes with maths and science. So I've got my science cats and my maths turtle here, Mathilda. You might have recognized her from the previous video. So out of these characters that I've drawn on screen, 3 of them out of 4 are actually cats. So I've actually represented that using a fraction form. You can get a sense of how many versus other things, or how many out of the total. Let's go on to the last one, which is ratios. So don't actually try and make this. This is absolutely, truly a joke. Don't actually try and make this, you will die. So here I've got a stupid example where I've got a recipe, and you sometimes represent recipes in terms of parts. So 1 part water, 1 part vampire blood, 2 parts vegetables, and 1 part sand. You might have also seen ratios represented using the notation I have at the bottom of the screen. Let me just add it over here. So here I've got 1:2. That's what I'm showing here by color, is that I've got 1 part water and I'll have 2 parts vegetables. This is a way of just showing ratios. So you could say parts, or you can represent them using this notation here. A very common ratio that you might have seen before is your screen. So the video you're watching now actually has an aspect ratio. That means how wide it is relative to how tall it is. This video I'm recording for you now is 16:9. If my height here is 9, then my width would be 16 across. There are other aspect ratios out there, and we basically represent them using this notation as well, a ratio. But now that you've seen those 3 different situations, we're now going to do some calculations next. On screen, I've got 6 out of 20. Now, in the previous video, I told you that the word of means multiply, but not always. In this occasion here, it doesn't mean multiply. So what actually goes with is the word out of. Out of is a maths term for a fraction. So every time you see this, you should think of a fraction sign. So 6 on this side and 20 on that side. That would give me a result of 6 out of 20. So I've converted the proportion into a fraction. But just like I mentioned in previous videos, it is almost always advisable to simplify the fraction before you call it done. So here I can see the top and bottom share a common factor, so I'm going to simplify it further. And I get 3/10. Now I'm going to do the same process, but I'm going to represent 6 out of 20 as a percentage. In this occasion here, I'm going to take the fraction and multiply it by 100/1. And to finish it off, I'm going to do some cross simplification and then multiply it out. So I get a final answer of 30%. So you can hopefully see that I'm using the previous tricks on percentages and fractions and so forth. And the cross simplification method is super helpful. And I'm using them to convert proportions into these 2 forms. In this example here, I've got some made up numbers. Mr. Bowman, that's me, Mr. Munn's maths class has 13 boys and 12 girls, and I've got a couple of word-based questions here. Write out the number of girls as a fraction of the total. So fraction form, I need to figure out 12 out of how many. So I can first write down the number of girls in the problem is 12. And now I have to calculate the total, so how many students in total. Well, that's going to be the boys and the girls added together, so 12 plus 13, which gives 25. Therefore, the fraction of girls is going to be 12 out of 25. If I could, I would simplify it further, but I don't think 12 and 25 has any factors in common. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't think it has any factors in common, so I'll have to call that done. The next problem down below is to express the number of boys as a percentage of the total. So similar, but different. So we know that the boys, the fraction of boys, let me just go back. Whenever you have to do a conversion to percentage in these type of problems, almost always your first step will be to create the fraction first. And then you do the process that I showed in a previous video. I'll leave a link up here where we did fractions percentage conversions, and that's what we're going to use. So fraction of boys is going to be 13 out of 25. I'm using the 25 I just calculated earlier. Now to do percentage of boys, I will just convert that fraction into percentages. Now I'm going to cross simplify. So I get an answer of 52%. So here it is again, the elixir of life and the basic ingredients. Again, don't make this at home. Don't try and drink it. I'm sure you'll die. Here I've tried to show you an example where you have to interpret a whole lot of information in written form, and then convert that into mathematical form. So here I've got a question that asks to express the amount of liquid as a fraction of the total. And in the liquid in this case would be the water and the vampire blood. You could argue that maybe if you blend up the vegetables, it could be a liquid, but I intended the question to be basically about the water and the vampire blood. So I need to figure out how much parts is actually made of liquid. So I found out that the amount of parts that are liquid is going to be 2 parts. Okay, and the original question is about expressing this as a fraction of the total. So I need to find out how much the total parts are. So I'm just going to add all those numbers together. So the total. And now that I have the total, I can put it together as a fraction. Now, when I get to this stage here, I want you to learn here that not only can you simplify things top and bottom of a fraction, you can also do the same thing with the unit. A unit is things like centimeters, grams, kilometers, seconds, and so forth. In this occasion here, the unit is the word parts. So if I divide the word or divide the unit parts from top and bottom, they actually cancel out. And this is actually a unique feature about proportions or ratios, is that they don't have units. Because of this thing going on, they tend to cancel out. So this is going to be just 2/5. The next example down here is to express the amount of sand as a percentage of the total. So again, like I suggested in the previous worked example, that if you have to calculate a percentage, it's almost always advisable to convert to fraction first and then convert the fraction into a percentage. So here we go. Find the fraction. Need to figure out how many parts of sand versus the total. I've already calculated the total to be 5, so I just go straight into fraction. 1 out of 5. Now I'm going to convert this into percent. I'm now going to cross simplify. I get 20% as my final answer. And again, if that procedure that I just did now confused you, again, I'll give you a link to the previous video where I cover that technique. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up. Some feedback would be great. If you want to try some questions for yourself at home, I've got 2 up on screen. And you can put your answers in the comments down below, and the first few comments I will give you a heart symbol or a pin or something like that to signify if you've got them correct, and then we can all see what the correct answer is together. I will see you guys in the next video.